And we're live. So, hello and welcome, guys, to Cyber Diaries podcast. We have episode number 18. And again, we have an amazing guest with us. We have Keith Price, who's a CSO from National Highways. So, first of all, welcome, Keith.
Thanks, Marius. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. I'm currently in Cardiff University today, so I've been on the road all week between London and today I'm in Cardiff.
Brilliant. Cardiff is obviously it's a wonderful place in Wales. So, first of all, I guess I wanted to understand, and obviously it's interesting to have someone who's has so much experience in cybersecurity world, but looking through your career, obviously you started out in Air Force and then worked in the DoD. So I guess if you could just give our viewers a bit of a runway into how you ended up in Air Force, how you ended up in DoD, and sort of running through your history of your career, Keith.
Yeah, certainly. So back in the early 90s, I joined the U.S. Air Force because I knew that continuing, going to university and things like that was not going to be for me at the time. And so the Air Force gave me an opportunity to see the world. I worked in 27 different countries over the 20 years I was in the Air Force. I worked as a munitions system specialist, building laser guided munitions and missiles. But at the same time, I worked with mainframes. That's how I started out in the technology sector, operating as a mainframe operator and then moving over into architecture and security later in my career. And it was basically because as the munitions people, we were way over on the other side of the base or outside the base, and the IT people in the Air Force they preferred to give us the training and the tools and the admin to do the work ourselves. And so that's kind of wore two hats over those 20 years, and retired from the Air Force. Went back to university in my late 30s, earning 2 degrees in cybersecurity. And then I went back to work for the US Army as a civil servant in Stuttgart, Germany. Was there for 2 years, director of network operations for United States Africa Command. And then I demoted myself to get me and my family back to the UK,
Yeah.
where I worked in security operations at RAF Molesworth for 3 years. And then after that, I went committed fully the last 8, 9 years now into the private sector. So I worked with Deloitte, Dark Matter over in the UAE, short stint at Little Fish in Nottingham, and then under my own limited company as a head of infosec for Envision Pharma Group for almost 3 years. And now I've been with National Highways as their chief security officer for the last 9 months, and it's been an amazing time. I've been waiting for a job like this where I can lead and own all the security for an organization and not just the cyber, because I feel that it's so important to centralize that leadership.
Actually, I just really wanted to pick because obviously, I guess sometimes people overlook and overthink. You normally have a CISO title. You obviously got a CSO title, and as you mentioned, you own all of the security. So I guess I wanted to pick on and actually bring it back to. I just been was it about a month ago? I went to a cyber convergence conference where we talked about how physical and cyber is converging, because if you look at sort of cyber world, most of the things like, CCTV cameras, all of this is going back onto the network. They're not anymore, how it used to be, they're not analog anymore. Everything is becoming digital. So you need
Correct.
to protect those networks as well. So I think bringing that scope under one umbrella is an important, I guess, way of how cyber is converging.
Yeah, and at National Highways, I have a massive OT estate as well, right? So, of all my most of my critical systems actually sit in the OT, IoT space. So we look at radar, CCTV on the highways systems. They're all operational technology, but they have an IT IP interface, and so the security of those is paramount. So the people in the physical security aspects as well, right? So I have data centers, I have data hubs, OT hubs. I have all these things that sit on the side of the road that physically are vulnerable, right? Someone could pull
Yeah.
over, probably easily get into the data cabinet and wreak havoc. So And then on the last bit around the people security, obviously we have state actors to think about. I'm a critical national infrastructure. I'm a partner in that world, so I have my role within the Department of Transport. My peers sit in rail. My peers sit in the port authorities, and then even more widely, my peers sit in nuclear, national grid, water. So these infrastructures are very IT OT focused, and so the people security aspect, we look at things like protesters who may disrupt the motorways. We look at um, folks who want to climb gantries and disrupt. Now, they have a right to protest. I'm not calling into question that
Yeah.
whatsoever, but we have to think about their safety as well. So if they're protesting on a highway, I'm responsible for their safety and security as protesters as well. So plus my partners, our workers that are on those sites.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about the word security or cyber anymore. And when you talk about convergence, it's about, Greg Vandergast says it well, right? And I'm a big proponent of introducing quality, introducing safety, and using security as a way to integrate and expand those capabilities. And then security becomes a byproduct.
I think it's a very important thing that you just mentioned because I talked with a few people who work within sort of, national infrastructure, and it's a very different, I guess, mindset when you get to that level. Because in normal, say, financial services business, whenever you calculate risk, it's usually just the dollar signs. But when you go into national, sort of critical national infrastructure, you are potentially talking about lives lost when things go
Life.
wrong. So,
That's right.
as you say, and then you start thinking about safety and things like that. I mean, you touched a bit on sort of aspects of, but I would like to hear a bit more. So what does a normal, typical life, sort of a day look like? Of CSO of national highways. What kind of problems are you guys tackling day in and day out?
Sure. Yeah. So, the cyber team here was built by my predecessor, and Philomena, she did an amazing job. My heads of, so I'll give you a little bit of history. I've usually been brought in to either fix a broken cyber team or build a new one
Yeah,
over the last 30 years. So, Highways is the first instance where I've inherited a very good team. At its height, it was 200 individuals, both permanent and contractor. A lot of projects going on. So maturity wise, it's in a great place. And so what that has enabled me to do as the CSO is to say, okay, cyber folks, you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing. I am now going to go and start influencing the business on how we can build and integrate security and resilience and recovery better across all of highways to include our supply chain and to include our government partners in critical national infrastructure, but more widely.
yeah,
And so, a typical day for me is I'm traveling the United Kingdom. I'm in Cardiff today. I have a cyber futures program where we work with universities, Cardiff, Cambridge, Warwick universities, and we're doing research and development in artificial intelligence, connected vehicles, autonomous plant, machinery that's fixing the roadside at night uh, using AI and autonomous vehicles. I'm going out and I'm meeting our partners in the supply chain. I'm meeting our partners who work with us in the consulting world. And then more broadly, I'm going out and meeting the executives both within highways and again in the Department for Transport and the government more broadly. One of the things I'd really like to do, and something I did early in my time at highways, was I went and visited all the offices and regional operations centers and network operations centers across England in highways
mm,
over my first few months. And I got to talking to the people, the frontline workers at highways, the traffic officers, the regional operations center operators. And I said, what sucks? What sucks at highways? Doesn't have to
yeah,
be security. Just tell me what sucks. And I heard a lot of the same things,
mm,
from Newton Lee Willows in the Northwest to Leeds to Birmingham to Bristol. They all are telling me the same thing, right? So that enabled me to go back to my boss and my peers in digital services and say, hey, these three things are the three things that I heard that suck. How about we try and fix them now, build our brand as a directorate that is about solving problems, fixing issues that cause our user base just, untold amounts of pain. And what that does for me then is I understand the pain points of my stakeholders.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily security focused, but they then see I have empathy, true, genuine empathy, and I'm about helping them to solve those problems. And that's kind of a typical day for me now in the last 9 months has been going out and problem solving and trying to make lives better. And also, we always talk about hygiene in IT, and if we just fixed some of the hygiene issues. So from that quality view, how can we address some of the quality issues that, what, if we do that, we're going to solve a lot of the security issues.
I think it's a great point because I remember you guys talk in similar ways when you spoke on Joe Head's podcast, and it really brings truth as well. I think because whether you look at IT, whether you look at cybersecurity, I think as sort of as technical people, we normally have people with skills who can do automation, who can do efficiency sort of improvements. So I'm a big proponent as well. I tried my company as well. Because I have quite a decent expertise, I guess, across Microsoft estate. You sometimes think there are tools such as Microsoft Power Automate, Power apps where you can bring so much efficiency to not to the key point is here, same as AI and all of these automation tools, not to replace people, but to allow people to do more with their time. And I think
Yes.
that's a very important aspect. We need to help people, as you say, bring efficiency. And especially one thing as well, we talk sometimes, in cybersecurity, there's a lot of human error. Now, when you automate things, machine doesn't make human errors. So if you can bring some of these processes into automation, you obviously have a unified output. There is no errors.
Well, I don't know. Machines make errors too, though.
Oh, yeah, sometimes.
Right now they're still only as good as those of us that teach them.
Yeah,
Uh, but it's less likely, I would say,
yeah,
if the process is adhered to by the machine. Um, it is less likely. To your point around building the teams and having the skill sets, you know. I'm a prime example. In my last role, I was a very small, I started out as a one-man cybersecurity team, for this
yeah,
company who had a ransomware attack. So I was rolling up my sleeves and learning Azure and learning Intune and Sentinel and all these other things and Power Automate, like you said, because I wanted to figure out how to make my life easier,
yeah,
right? Like you said, and one of the things that was going on in highways was let's set up some teams and let's get in some consultants and let's look at how we can automate and build efficiency and blah. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go to my teams and say, you do it. You know what needs solving. You know what
yeah,
tools are out there. My SOC, they're using Copilot to triage 80% of the phishing emails and think again, to make their lives easier, to reduce the stress and strain on their mental health, not to replace them, because
yeah,
I'm not really interested in that. But to your point, they'll find a way to make life easier. And hey, happy days, go for it. We don't need consultants to tell us how to do it. What we need is to give our people the time, the duty time, the work time to go out and solve these issues versus constantly just throwing stuff at them. Utilization. It's one of the nice things about being at highways is I don't have profits and revenues to achieve.
yeah.
What I do is I have to achieve an efficient function that brings value to the taxpayer, that brings safety, security, quality, and cyber to the travelers on the motorways. That's my responsibility, and at the best price that I can possibly do it.
That sounds perfect. Now, I guess we kind of touched a bit, and I wanted to expand, I guess, CISO role, sort of the pinnacle of, cybersecurity, I guess, career, but it's changing a lot over the last few sort of maybe 10, 20 years. CISO used to be, and it's still in some organization, you see that, it's sort of head of IT security or, in some ways just kind of branched around IT. we're no
Sure.
longer just securing IT. We have HR has data, HR has applications, finance has the same, business development. The CISO role remit, I guess, is expanding across the business. So how do you see, that evolving, and how do you think, I guess, on the back of that, how do CISOs need to think about what they need to do to be at that level to make sure that they can still create influence and not just be, within technical sort of security acumen?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the purists would say the CISO is still about, business and information security, uh, but it doesn't always look like that these days. I
Yeah.
think someone has said recently, I think I was Joe Head today, the CISO doesn't exist because you have CISOs with 20 years experience, you have CISOs with 5 years experience. Okay, who am I to say who's a CISO and who's not? But it's become very head of cybersecurity maybe is a subset of the CISO. But you're right, most CISOs they report into the CIO still. Some on the business facing units will report into other executives, and that's okay. That's not, I know a lot of people always say, oh, we can't truly influence the business until we get a seat at the table. And I don't know, earn it, right?
Yeah.
You look at the biggest companies in the world, their CISOs are business leaders. They're not IT leaders, right? And that's okay. They're very successful. They influence the business and they get the the budget to hire technical SMEs and cyber SMEs to work on their teams. That's how it is. That's how CFOs operate, and that's how COs operate, right? They all have a bit of experience and knowledge. But you're right. We're evolving. I think it's going to look at like a chief resilience officer. My position as an example, I sit and I report to the CDIO. I'm in the digital services directorate at National Highways. And that's fine for 1/3 of my responsibility. The other 2/3, though, don't sit comfortably within digital services, right?
Yeah.
So potentially, the position could be chief resilience. And I'm kind of just pulling that out because I deal with a lot of resilience at highways. We have a resilience team. We were constantly looking at recovery. How do we, Friday is a great example. Our silver national response team went into action, right? And it was my team joining the bigger team. It wasn't cyber leading that effort.
Yeah.
It was another team at highways, and we participated. So again, I think if as security leaders, I think if we can remove the cyber and maybe even remove the security from the conversation with our peers, we we'll build our brand so much better, right? When I went to major projects at highways, they probably have 2/3 budget building new things at highways, and they're you know building new interchanges and highways and things like that. So they have a big budget. And I went in and I talked to them and I said, I'm not here to talk to you about cyber. I'm not here to talk to you about security. I want to know where we can help improve the safety and the quality. I want to know where I can help you, do other things that are important to you. And they were sort of like, what the hell? Is this guy for real? And it was a good interaction because, they said, okay, well, what about this? What about if I have a security issue that's not cyber? Who do I report it to? And I said, well, my SOC, because it's actually a security operations center, not a cybersecurity operations center. Oh, here's the phone. Just call one person, and then we do the rest, right? So it's about again building those efficiencies, and you have to be a business leader. It's not about being a technical leader. Yes, of course, within your own teams, you can talk cyber security and technology all day, and I think that's still important that your teams see you as someone who can walk the walk. Um, but even better than that is if your teams see that you have the influence to make decisions at the highest level, to have a decent budget, a decent headcount. We can't be too greedy. We have to be pragmatic and realistic. But if they see that you're out there championing the things that they want and need, they have the tools, they have the technology, they have the training and development, and of course the salaries too, right? Because
Yeah.
they should be compensated properly. If they see you doing those things as a business leader, you're doing your job.
Yeah, I think, I'm the more I learn about things, as you said, for example, people are who complaining that they can't do their job because of the wrong, reporting lines or things like that. To me, that says, people are either hiding behind their technical acumen, sort of, the whale, or people, I
Mm,
always say, if you can't get security initiatives across the line, it's not the audience problem, is the speaker problem. And if you
yeah.
can't influence your audience, that is your problem. It's not their problem. And I think, as you say, you need to earn the support and to be listened to. It won't come out of just because you have a reporting line. And I think sometimes people hide behind their tech acumen and hiding, behind, excuses. If you know how to communicate well with the people, you can reach the influence. And as you say, I think especially struck with me when you said, when you go into a new organization, ask and find out how you can help people. So you build a sort of a team that supports you when you need help from them. And I think that that's kind of, the way to think as you move forward. It's about empathy. It's about, as you talked about teams as well. I think sometimes as well, there are leaders who, try to take victories away from the teams. You as a leader, I think especially your goal is to unlock and unblock any sort of blockages for your team to succeed, and then you put them on a pedestal when they succeed.
Precisely. And you know what? If me and my teams are being invited to other teams, away days or all hands, if me and my teams are being invited to coffee and lunch to talk about something, if my position on the board meeting and the executive meeting is not at the end of the day, but it's near the middle of the day, that's those are our metrics for success, and that the business cares about us participating in what they're trying to do. You talked about the reporting line. The CIO didn't always have a seat at the table either.
Yeah,
IT was a cost center. Now IT is a differentiator, and so cyber, we're sort of behind the curve. Like IT, we're probably about 5-7 years behind where IT was 7 years ago. We're still viewed as a cost center. It's hard to prove ROI when something doesn't happen, right? So again, that's for us to get past. That's for us to solve how we communicate that, right? So if my corporate risk is XX number and it never changes, no matter how much money the board throws at it, shame on me. And
yeah,
it's not that I necessarily need to move that number down, but if the number stays current or stays pretty solid, I need to tell the story of why is it staying that way? Well, you know why? Because the better we do our job in the security, the more we solve, but the more we find, right?
yeah,
And so when we find things, that risk score, it could stay. It's more like a sine wave versus a pew,
yeah.
So again, but you can't go in front of an executive and go, well, yeah, 480 million vulnerabilities across 6,000 systems and an average CVE score of 7.2, because they'll go, what the hell are you talking about? You
Yeah,
know, and they'll be on their phones and they're like, they don't give a shit, right? And
yeah,
and that's your problem. That's you failing. So you have to go in. Today we had an exercise where we had a rock manager come up in front of us, and they did what would happen if our roadside signals and signs were hacked, and at the same time a Volvo was hacked by a hacker to cause a crash. So
mm,
the crash happened, then the hacker hacked our signs and caused all sorts of chaos. And this was an event. We
yeah,
had the CCTV, we had the computerized images that looked like the highway, we had all the screens of the rock operators and what they're trying to do, and their systems are crashing and all that. And it was only 15 minutes, but I said, you know what? I want to take that to the executive and the board, because they'll look at that and go, I recognize this. I recognize this could be something that happens to us. And what are we going to do about it?
yeah. I think it's a very important aspect of what you just said, Keith. And it goes back to this creating an influence. I think you know, and even I'm a bigger proponent now. When I do mentoring, I always talk to, especially junior security people. I think I said you have to start early. If you want to reach somewhere, you have to learn how you communicate and become a storyteller. Because even at the junior level, however great your idea is, if you can't influence other people to take up the idea might never reach a day of light. So when you get to the
Right.
CISO and pinnacle, you have to influence even more influential people across, the board who, has to get on board with your narrative. So pitching that narrative, showcasing those visual examples. That's why sometimes it's good to play with like showing them dashboards or honeypots or actual scenarios of what actually happened when somebody made a mistake, when something actually happened, instead of, oh, did you say 2 million vulnerabilities? Nobody cares about numbers unless they tell a story.
Yeah, and then something else we did a quick, I think it was 10 minutes, but we showed a live privilege escalation to the executives and how it happens and the timeline. But we were doing it. One of my cyber SOC analysts was doing a live privilege, and they were like, that's all it, that's as easy as it could be, right? And obviously we showed the layers of defenses and the things that they would have to get past in our environment,
Yeah.
and some of the things, so if they got here, what protections, what alerts would go off and things like that. So again, it's about show and tell. It's, they say tell the story, but I think, I'm a guy, I'm a visual. I like to be in the place that I'm looking to secure, right? So I visit tunnels on the highways, I visit bridges, I visit pumping stations. I'm looking at these things and going, what are the threats to this thing,
Yeah.
right? Because I can touch it, I can smell it. So you have to do that because executives are the same way. They want to taste, touch, feel, and smell what the issue is or
Yeah.
what the success is too, because you go and you want to, so you don't want to be all fear, we say FUD. You don't want to be all FUD because FUD has a very short lifespan.
Yeah.
You know, After that, you need to start showing what are the positives that we're doing. And again, it could be, so I'll use a good example at highways. The joiners, movers, levers process
Yeah.
that's the thing everyone told me sucked. And so now we have an IAM project that is looking to solve and automate and reduce all this manual crap people have to go through. And people are like, hey, yeah, it's not a security thing, but you know what? When we automate levers, we reduce the number of accounts, dormant accounts,
Yeah.
unused privileged accounts, admin accounts, as an example. We look at things like global admin, right? So all these things, they're things that the business do every day, that have a security impact. And so if I make their lives easier, you know what? They're going to make my life easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
We you kind of touched a bit, Keith, here on ROI. So I wanted to get a bit of an expansion, I guess, of your thoughts. As you say, security used to be a cost center. Now we are sort of working and creating, and those who are more successful are, creating initiatives that showcases, potential ROI. I myself, I think we are as in security, in my team, we are investing in actually speeding up sales processes, it sort of allowing business development people to complete their cycles quicker by providing answers to security questionnaires, to allowing them to giving them more information. So how else do you see sort of that scale, I guess, tipping to our side where we showcase the business, sort of the ROI, what we do?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. The first one is from my last organization, Envision Pharma, where they had suffered a ransomware attack before they had brought me on.
Mhm.
I was brought on to help continue to recover, but then they said, can you stay and help us build our security better?
Yeah.
And I started immediately thinking, okay, I think here's a way, because it was a technology company and they sold product. I said, there's got to be a way where I can actually use this to actually show ROI of cyber. And so what I did was, by improving the maturity of the security, by reducing costs, by automation, by reducing incidences of poor product, by improving quality, I was able to actually show dollars and pounds And an example was when we went to get to renew our corporate insurance. The broker said, "You guys won't get cyber insurance because you just did a claim 2 years ago for ransomware. Nobody's going to cover you for cyber." And I said, I don't know. Right. So I had I had Zurich and Chubb and all these come, and they threw all these questionnaires at me and all this. And I sat in all these meetings. And after we went through all this RFI, they came back and said, okay, we will give you cyber insurance. And oh, by the way, the premiums were 30% less than before the ransomware attack.
Yeah.
So oh, okay. So I cost them, as a contractor, I said, I cost you this much a year. But if we just look at the insurance premium savings by what we've accomplished, your net, I've actually earned you money back. And that was just one instance. I was able to show other things where, because there was less downtime for some of our services, we were able to be more competitive when we were going to win business, right? So I said, well, we may not have won, because our competitors would have won that business because our quality, our uptime, they were all not great. And a lot of the bids, the clients came back and said, you were number two because your competitor was just better. Or from a security perspective, we earned some accreditations and things. And I know a lot of people talk about ISO and cyber essentials and things like that. But just by earning those accreditations and things, it gives your customers a sense of calm. It gives them a sense that, okay, yeah, to do this, it might be a bit of an audit exercise, whatever, but they got SOC 2, they got ISO 27001, they proved they did all these things. And so when I went to do those questionnaires then, which, used to be 400 questions and they were a nightmare to do, I had it all in the bag. It'd take me like 15 minutes to answer those things because it was all done.
Yeah.
And so that gave our potential clients, it instilled in them a confidence in us.
Yeah, I think
And then,
sometimes, as you say, it's a very important thing that sometimes is overlooked that, if you are in a bidding war with your potential competitor, and
yeah,
then you say you have ISO and SOC 2 and Cyber Essentials, and they don't, that could be, the difference between winning and losing if everything is equal pegging.
it can, yes. And then at highways, my ROI deals with a KPI, a metric that we call KSI, and it's killed and seriously injured. So this KPI we want to be low, right? We
Yeah.
don't want deaths and injuries on the highways. So my view is, if I can, at the best price possible, at the best cost, contribute to reducing those killed and seriously injured by, again, improving the safety and the quality and the security of our roads, that's my ROI to the traveler,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm not going to, I can't save the, I could, I guess, if I had some way to fill potholes, maybe
Yeah.
I could save costs on repairs to their cars and things like that. But if I reduce my costs in cyber, every million that I save by not spending on cyber, I can give that million back to highways to fill potholes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
indirectly, I am contributing to the ROI.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I guess I wanted to expand, and I know that you've been working on some exciting ideas, and you had a sort of a vision of, Highways being such a big company, and obviously having such a massive supply chain, how you can create a sort of SOC service for your supply chain that potentially, you helping them, but they also you raising their sort of level of security posture through that exercise. So I just wanted to see how this idea came about, and and how far along are you through achieving your objectives in that sense.
Yeah, sure. So on my third day here at Highways, I attended what we call leadership management group, and it's the top sort of 70 executives in Highways. The CEO, all the executive directors, and all that. And one of the workshops we did was around transitioning national highways from a a delivery agency to a service provider, right? So in the future, we want to provide a service,
Yeah.
and immediately, because of the work that I did with Dark Matter and Little Fish and Deloitte, immediately my brain heard service provider and went, what am I going to deliver in security? How am I going to do this in security? And so I took over, and my brain started going, and I went away from that thinking, where's the most obvious place to start? And that's in security operations center, right?
Mhm.
So I went back to the team and I said, I've got this idea. What would it look like if we offered our SOC monitoring and maybe a little bit of vulnerability management, maybe like, something that could class as like an essentials,
Yeah.
SOC service to our suppliers. And I'm thinking our small and medium business suppliers, those who traditionally would not have their own cyber,
Yeah.
they couldn't afford it. It's not part of the business. They would accept the risk, or it's just baked into their IT somehow. But I says, okay, what if we do it from the view of having a visibility, a monitoring of our supply chain risk, but they pay. Hi, I'm
Ah,
back.
yeah, we just
I'm
lost you
back.
there for a second. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I was
No,
just
it's fine.
saying I charge them, but at what it costs me to deliver that service. So really, really, really affordable. And what it does, it actually gives me the biggest benefit, right? So
Yeah.
if I use the recent attack on the NHS in London, it wasn't an attack on an NHS, it was an attack on their supply chain, the blood testing supplier. But what happened was, because they were impacted, it had a domino effect on the NHS having to cancel surgeries and things, right? So when I look at my supply chain, if my supply chain is hacked, is attacked, it might not have a direct impact in that my systems are also attacked, but if they're taken down for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what impact does that have on me building roads, repairing roads, being able to deliver strategic roads as a service to our customers, our drivers, right?
Yeah.
So by so our first customer is, I'm kind of cheating because it's a project within highways
Mhm.
that is funded through the major project scheme, and it's the Stonehenge A303,
Yeah.
right? So it's a big project. And what we're going to do is we're going to monitor in our Sentinel. So we use Sentinel as our SOC.
Yeah.
We're going to monitor their systems, and if we see something that we could possibly interrupt, we will do. If we see some vulnerabilities, we can send them a playbook on how to categorize, or, because not all vulnerabilities are equal. Even
Yeah.
critical ones may not be exploitable. So we're going to help them solve some of their vulnerabilities. And then eventually, I hope to be able to offer them cyber education awareness at a cost. I can offer them maybe professional services like GRC, virtual CISO, security architecture. So they become my customer. I'm now their supplier.
Mhm.
Uh, we're in the same we're in the same ecosystem. We're in the same. So what that does is it allows me to reduce the need for taxpayer pounds to fund my security, because what happens is my supply chain eventually starts funding more and more and more, and I rely less and less on the taxpayer to fund me. But also, I'm improving the security of those small and medium businesses, strengthening their resilience as a company as well, which means they can invest more in growth. They can invest more in hiring more people, which I hope will have a positive impact on the UK's financial resilience and gross national product, right? So that's a huge 10-year dream. But for now, if I can offer, again, if I can have visibility of my supply chain risk and make those small and medium businesses more resilient, it's a double win.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, as you mentioned, because obviously, sometimes people forget, UK is made up of like what 90% of sort of moms and pop shops who might be, potentially in your supply chain within national highways. So if we can, the big organizations who have, massive supply chains, they potentially have a great deal of help to these companies. So, and as you say, sort of double whammy, because not only you getting money back and saving in your budget, but you're also helping and reducing the risk of your supply chain. So I'm just going to segue quickly into next question, I guess, which is kind of in the same scene. Supply chain risk is very important, and everyone's talking about, obviously, a ransomware now potentially can happen through supply chain. Obviously delivering, whether it's updates, whether it's software updates, and any kind of updates, so through your supply chain can create a great havoc. But I guess the
Oh
question
yeah.
is, when you start in addressing a risk in your supply chain, how deep normally one goes? Because, when you're talking about third parties, you might have hundreds in probably in highways is thousand third parties, and then you need to look at fourth parties, fifth parties. Where do you stop?
That is an excellent point. I mean, you do have to be realistic with this, otherwise, you're just going to continue down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of risk management, if I'm honest, in its usual form,
Yeah.
right? So I would like to say you use a risk-based approach, but yeah, who really does,
Mm.
or who really does effectively? But what I would say is we have to start somewhere, right? So Andy Ellis, he wrote a great book. He's an Air Force vet like I am. He's a cybersecurity leader like I am, and he wrote a book called 1% Leadership. And he's basically saying, you know what, just do every week, do 1% something better. Don't try and boil the ocean. Stop trying to solve all the world's problems. So I think to your question is, let's start with our first line supply chain. And again, we're not going to solve all their problems, but here's the thing. The suppliers that supply me probably also supply National Rail. They probably also supply the water companies in National Grid. So I join up with those critical national infrastructure partners, and and together we're providing supply chain risk management and a benefit to those, again, like you said, 90% small and medium businesses, but who are doing critical work for us. And a lot of times we're in business with some of these small and medium businesses for 10, 20, 30 years. These are long-term projects. Building roads and rail and nuclear, these are long projects. So we form these relationships. And then you know what? Maybe in a year or two, we find that we can also see their supply chain, the second level, right? Maybe we can do something there. Maybe it doesn't make sense. I don't know yet. I wish I had the answer, but I think if we start here, the other knock-on effect is we all hate those security questionnaires. We all hate, but wouldn't it be great if we could just onboard a potential supplier, even for a POC, and kind of just see what's going on in their world, and then go, out of you three POCs, we're going with this supplier because their systems, they're taking care of their systems from a patching perspective, a vulnerability perspective, updates, having EDR, and I think your point alluding to last week, we had a supplier to a global powerhouse cause issues to a lot. It impacted the world, and it was
Yeah.
just a simple mistake. Something that solid processes would have maybe not stopped. I don't know, but it probably possibly would have mitigated the impact. So yeah, it really is a tough question, and I think it's just we got to do it and see what happens.
Yeah, I think you're right, Keith. I think you obviously have to start somewhere, and you have to not necessarily, as you say, not in the sense of your normal risk sort of management process, but you also probably have to think about, criticality of your suppliers, and you start with the biggest ones, and then work your way down the chain and see how far I guess you can get down to it. I guess, I'm not a big proponent of solving problems by tools, but there are specific platforms who, say, you're potentially looking to work with potential supplier. Now, if you can leverage the assessments who someone already made on their due diligence, well, that can save you a lot of time. So,
Yeah.
companies who, using sort of GRC risk sort of tools, who has assessments and can be shared in live across, if someone worked already with AWS and then you started working with them and you can see AWS assessment of them, you can already make a
Yeah.
picture of, how well they do in security. So I think these are the ways sort of to filter in, but I guess just to round it up, I guess, time flies when you're having fun, and we're close to the end. I just wanted to get, I guess, your final thoughts, Keith. How do you see, the sort of, I guess it's would be crazy to plan more than a couple of years ahead, but how the security landscape, and sort of security leadership is going to change over the next year or two?
Yeah, so security leadership is a great question because I think it's something we don't do very well, if I'm honest. And
Mhm.
because we're so busy, it's hard to mentor the next. So it's almost like you get thrown into the deep end. I was very privileged in my professional journey that I just happened to get lucky with great leaders. I was given opportunities that challenged me and so forth. But I think security leaders of the future, it's up to us. And at the same time, leader doesn't always mean supervisor.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of people in cybersecurity, they're introverts, but they still want to rise up through the ranks. So we have to offer more opportunities to those individual contributors to be able to rise up through a career that may meet the pinnacle of CISO, but they're not a CISO because they'd rather just do that architecture, that engineering, or whatever it may be really well without having the responsibility. And so it's up to us to provide those career paths for people, right? And not force what we believe a CISO should look like. I think BISO, the generation of the BISO, is a great example where I think some very smart CISOs or chief risk officer created this position. I'm not sure where it came from, but they
yeah,
said, we need somebody that has more business focus, less technical and IT focus, right? So that's a great example of where, leadership positions within information security are evolving.
yeah,
And finally, I would say, one of the big things now is there's a discussion about what skills do you have to, is cyber an entry level position and yada, yada, yada. So I can tell you from experience, I've hired people with zero cyber or IT experience. Now, I didn't put them in a SOC. They weren't engineers and they weren't architects and they weren't cloud, technicians and stuff. But their cyber and infosec is so much more broad.
yeah,
And I've had teachers that I've hired into my team. They were teachers for 10, 15 years. And now guess what they do for me and my team? They teach cyber. They
yeah.
teach cyber to my employees because they know what it takes to teach people. So stop being so damn, such a prima donna in our career as cybersecurity professionals. Park your biases and say, there's so much opportunity for other people. Don't gatekeep just because it's what you had to do to pay your dues to get into the field. Think imaginatively on how you can use other skill sets to make your security team better.
Yeah, I think it's an important and probably amazing point to round it up, as you say, Keith, is if you duplicate sort of your team of your own viewpoints, then you're gonna get always the same outcome. There's always said to, don't try and get different outcome from doing the same work. So as you
Yeah.
and you mentioned, I've interviewed and I've worked with teachers who went into cyber, and they're great communicators. That's a great skill to bring in. I've also brought in people who, one of my guys in my current team, he's been an electrician for 16 years and never worked in cyber, and he's been probably the best person I've hired in a little while. So,
Yeah.
you need to be able to, I guess, I always say there's two A's that's the most important thing you need in cyber: attitude and aptitude. The rest you can learn.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
I think it's very pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us, Keith, and thank you very much for your time. Obviously, you're on the road, but sharing your wisdom and your ideas around, cybersecurity. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Marius. It's been a pleasure, sir. And